Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever. Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective, and this is my co-host and head practitioner, Shannon Callery. And welcome to the podcast today. Today we are finally going to wrap up mold. I promise this won't be the last one for a little bit here. I know we've taken our time with it, and today we're getting into a lot of juicy stuff, and that is, how do we actually address mold? And we're going to go through our process. And, the first part of our process that we use to address mold is pretty straightforward, and then it gets really murky. So we're gonna go over the beginning pieces, and we're gonna go over our protocol. We're gonna go over some more generalized protocols you can use, and then we'll kind of get into how do we reassess and how do we kind of determine after our initial piece of mold where we go from there, things to look out for. We're going to dive deep into mast cell work. We're going to dive deep into neural inflammation and nervous system regulation and bile flow and all kinds of really good stuff here. So super excited to wrap this up today. So Shannon, I'm gonna have you start.
Yeah.
How do we actually address mold? How do I get mold out of the body?
Okay. So I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing us say this by now, but drainage support is always going to be the first place that we're going to start. So first thing that we do, just like everything else, is always supporting drainage pathways, liver, kidneys, making sure you're going to the bathroom, all that good stuff. I will say that, I've never worked with another practitioner for mold, but I know some people maybe like to separate things as far as like, with mold comes co-infections like parasites, bacteria, yeast, and all the things. So the way that we do it is 1 month on drainage support solely. And of course, we're going to talk about, if you're currently exposed to mold, things might look a little bit differently as far as like remediation and whatnot, but we won't go super deep into that. But I did want to mention that. Because that would be a little bit different of a story. But first month is always going to be on drainage. Second and third month is when we're going to, and I say month, but does take longer for some people, much longer than that. We're going to focus on the actual detoxing portion. So we're going to go in and we're going to start to address some of the co-infection stuff. So, that looks different for some people on what specifically it is, but we are using a blend of different herbs that kind of target multiple things. So like the bacteria, the parasites, yeast, whatever it is that you're dealing with, we're kind of targeting both things at one time there. And specifically in that third month, quote unquote, phase of detoxing is when we're going to introduce a binder called Carboxy from Cellcore. You've heard us talk about that before. Those are our favorite products to use specifically for detoxing work. Go ahead, Megan.
I just want to pause for a minute because, and this was before Shannon came on board. So I used to do this differently. And I want to explain why this is so important, because I know a lot of other practitioners will dive right in to like a little bit of liver detox pathway support and then right into a mold binder, or some dive right into a mold binder and gut work. And here's what I found doing it that way. And I learned this the hard way with clients, and also taking a multitude of courses and webinars and reading all kinds of books and doing all this stuff. So really the first month is strictly liver detox pathway support, and we'll say mitochondrial support in that. If you have mold illness, mold toxicity, the energy of your cells is not working great. You probably could guess that without even testing it, but the organic acids test does look deeper into that. So we usually do like 1 or 2 liver supporting supplements, an entry level binder, a very entry level, gentle binder, going slow here, something to support mitochondrial function. And then go listen to the Liver Detox Pathway Support podcast, all of that stuff. We do all of that stuff, and I highly recommend all of that kind of stuff. If we need to support bowel movements, yes, we'll do it then. Yeah. Then it's almost like we do a baby step up from that, where we're doing a little bit of a stronger binder. We're doing a little bit more like a stronger liver detox pathway support supplement. And then we baby step into some of the gut work. And here's the reason why we baby step in. I used to jump in right into mold in that second phase. And what I found was people were having significant reactions, and it was taking us forever. And it was also just a real struggle to get through a mold binder, to even get through some of the gut killing protocols. Like, it was very, very challenging, and people were really struggling. And what we find doing it this way, not that there won't be any struggle, because really no promises there. We do our best, and there's a lot of ways to make sure that you can function, that you can be okay working through this, but it's less. The reactions are far less doing this way. And when we look at the gut, we do some specific gut support with bacteria, yeast, fungus, and parasites first, before we even touch on the mold binder. And that may seem counterintuitive, because the mold is feeding all of these things as well. And when you have mold, the chances that you have pretty significant gut overgrowth, gut infections, is super high, and most people are extremely uncomfortable. And what we found is doing a little bit of gut support here actually helps with the intensity of the mold binder, and then getting deeper into a lot of the parasite work. So just like a little explanation there as to why we do it this way. We have done it other ways. I've done it a couple different ways here. And I found that people not only get better results this way, but also the reactions and intensity. And what I mean by intensity is really the intensity of the reactions is far less doing it this way than doing it a lot of other ways.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because, even like referring back to myself and my own experience, I previously had said I hadn't worked with another practitioner on mold, but that is a lie, because I started to, and we started with carboxy, and I physically couldn't, literally could not do it. And so yes, that is exactly why we try and take this really slow, and why, I'm doing air quotes when I say 2 months, because it's very different for each person, like the level of intensity and how quickly we can have you increase doses on everything. So yeah, we take a pretty slow approach to doing it. And like Megan said, we're also going to try and target some of these other things first, again, to lessen symptoms. And then I will add to that. So carboxy is the binder that we use for mold. And during that second phase of detox, you're always going to be on some supportive liver supporting supplement. So we like to use TUDCA from CellCore. Again, just best quality one that we found. I think there's one other one on the market, which is also pretty decent as well. And then we're also going to have you be on Para 3 during that phase, which is a incredibly strong, I will say, parasite killing supplement, but also has a ton of other herbs in there to target different things. It's kind of geared towards parasites, but again, covers a wide variety of things. And
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Just if you're not familiar with CellCore, you also do not have to use CellCore, and we will go over other protocols here. But TEDCA Body Bio is the other company that makes TEDCA, which is amazing. I'm not quite ready to get into BioFlow yet, but we're going to get there very soon, and TEDCA will come back up. But the reason we like carboxy is fulvic and humic acid. And these two binders are not only really, really strong, but also target mass amounts of mold strands. And this is the biggest reason why we like to use them. And if, there's a whole chart that I don't think we've linked yet, but we will link this chart of which strands of mold and which respond to which binders. And here's the thing, fulvic and humic acid do an amazing job across the board, which is why we start with this versus starting with some other different types of binders. Carboxy in particular, one of the reasons why we really like it is, yes, it's a binder. And this is really why we like Cellcore binders in general, is not only is it really strong, carboxy is a powder. It's not the prettiest. It's a black powder that you mix into some water and then drink it. But it's not going to interfere with nutrient absorption. It's actually going to increase nutrient absorption. It also targets, not only is it great for mold, it's also good for a lot of environmental toxins. I'll tell you, when I went on carboxy, I had done every other Cellcore binder multiple times before even carboxy was introduced as a product for Cellcore. And then I did not have any mold issues. I reacted very strongly to carboxy. And so I had to really, really baby step it, just like with our clients, when I started on it. And because it is so good, it's also, I will tell you, my hair, skin, and nails have never been better than when I first started carboxy. Everything really started to clear up because it is so strong, so powerful in the best ways. And it also is so supportive of nutrient absorption, which if you have mold and all of these gut infections, the last thing you need is something else taking and stripping nutrients from your body.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I actually have the chart up in front of me right now. It doesn't say specific, this might be a different chart. It doesn't say like specific strands of mold that it binds to, but it does go over basics of like, binds candida and fungal byproducts, mycotoxins, environmental and industrial toxins, parabens, and phthalates. Those are like some, and there's tons of other binding properties, but I will say that those are like the biggest ones. And maybe this is a chart that we'll link just so you guys can see it. But the nutrient absorption factor of it is a huge thing. And the fact that it's a selective binder as well. So meaning like you can take it with food, you can take it without food. It doesn't matter. It's not going to bind up any other supplements or medications that you're taking. It's very targeted. It's going to go in the body and do what it needs to do, essentially. So that's another great reason is, I mean, we've talked about charcoal and like bentonite clay, and I'm blanking on the other ones, but those are like some really basic ones. Those, and we do use those sometimes just at different times in protocols, but those can be a little bit more problematic because they have to be away from everything in order to go in and do their job. So another reason why we really love Cellcore binders.
Exactly. So once we start to get into the mold, so we're using this fulvic and humic acid. We're using usually something called Para-1, which is Mimosa pudica. It's basically just a gut scrubber. Anytime we're killing anything in the gut, we like to use that. It just basically goes through the intestinal tract and pulls out anything that shouldn't be there. And if you have, especially if you've had issues with constipation, if you've ever done a gut killing protocol and you've gotten really sick, like sometimes things just die and sit in your body, this is really supportive of helping to get all of that stuff out of your body. Now, a difference too with Para-3, which is why we like to use this with parasites, and I also want to touch on why we do parasites and mold work at the same time, because that's really valuable information. But Para-3 is, so Para-1, Para-2, which we use, so Para-1 is the Mimosa pudica, Para-2 is basically a blend of herbs that kill things specifically in the gut. Now, Para-3 is very special because it doesn't just work in the gut, it works systemically. And so often when we've got a parasite overgrowth issue, when we have mold issues, not to be super gross, but parasites can be in other places other than just your gut. Mm-hmm. Your brain, your sinuses, lungs, ovaries, these are not uncommon places. And once again, like Para-3 is a little bit unique in its ability to target these things systemically, which is another reason why it's so valuable that we have this tool in this product. And yes, once again, we're going to go over other protocols that aren't CellCore here in a few minutes, but there is a real reason why we use these CellCore products. It's not just, we're not affiliates. It's a specialized supplement company. We're not making a ton of money off of CellCore. We have, it's really for the quality of their products and our ability to limit the number of supplements people have to be on, because they are able to combine some of their products so we can take less things, which if you've worked with a lot of practitioners, I mean, Shannon and I have both been on 15, 20, 30, 33 was the most I've ever been on, I'm pretty sure. And I mean, you should never be on, absolutely should never be on that many supplements.
No. Yeah, I mean, I know it can be like supplements are a whole other topic alone, so I won't get too far into that. But yeah, we really are choosing these because we've had our own personal experiences with them, successful experiences. I have done so many things in the past to heal from candida and bacteria and parasites, and even worked on mold a little bit, but we know that these work, and that is our end goal, is to use the best products that we know of to get you through your journey. So very cut and dry with us. We like these supplements and they work well. So that's our first choice. I know that you were going to talk about the parasites and mold. So the reason why we do the parasite work with the mold is that parasites actually feed on mold. So it's something that's keeping them alive in your body. So we want to make sure that we're targeting the two at the same time. And almost always we're going to wrap up and do a little bit more parasite work, even when we are done with the mold or very near the end of the mold, just to go in and make sure there's nothing else lingering in your system that's going to cause some issues.
Parasites not only feed off of the mold, because mold also feeds bacteria, yeast, and fungus. Parasites are a little bit different than those other three because they also store mold inside of them. They also store heavy metals. So this is one of the biggest reasons why if someone has mold toxicity and or heavy metal toxicity, we have to address parasites, because we all have parasites. Go listen to our parasite episode. We all have parasites, and it's not a big deal, assuming they're in a reasonable amount that our body can handle. However, when we have one of these major toxin overload issues, we also need to understand that parasites are feeding off of these things and also storing them inside of the body. So if we go in and just do the mold and we know we have a parasite problem, and the mold is feeding these parasites, they're going to die eventually. They have life cycles. And when they die, they're going to release these toxins into your body. And if we don't address them at the same time, the likelihood of you getting sicker and having to go back through protocols goes up significantly. And this is a huge reason why people end up doing years and years and years of all kinds of gut work, of parasite work, of yeast, fungus, bacterial work, of never being able to clear out all of the mold or the heavy metals. This is a huge reason why this happens. And so this is a major, major factor why we do this together. And once again, we have a really high success rate with clients. And one of the biggest reasons is because we do the mold and the parasites at the same time.
Yeah. And it is, again, I feel like that's another touchy subject. I mean, parasites in general, I feel like are under the scope right now in people, too many people doing parasite cleanses and things like that, which it's not for everyone. But when it comes to something like this with mold, to us, it feels incredibly stupid to not do the parasite work with it. It would be, I mean, it's almost like wasting people's time because you know that they're going to come back and have to do it at some point. So that is something that we always address. And then after that first 3-month phase, so the drainage support, and then the 2 months of kind of targeting the other issues along with the mold, we like to go in and we'll retest at that point before we move forward, just to see how your body's doing. Is something else presenting itself? It's very common, kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion. Once we work on one really big thing, our body's going to be like, okay, now I'm here are these viral issues that have been laying dormant. Let's work on me now. So we always want to go in and check blood work to make sure we're not missing anything else before we kind of wrap up.
Exactly. And for most people, this looks like blood work. For some, it does look like an organic acids test. I would say it's one or both of those. It's usually we will not do a mycotoxin test because the excuse me, the three main things that we're really looking for at that point, we need to make sure one, the mold is gone. And for many people, it is. And for many others, we need a little bit more work. And so we'll get into a secondary mold protocol here in just a little bit. We also need to make sure the parasites are in a reasonable place. And so we have to look at blood work for that. So really blood work is non-negotiable. And then the organic acids test, it really depends on the person if we recommend that. We take finances into account as well because it is a $300+ test. So we also take that into account. The other thing we need to make sure is the yeast and fungal issues are gone. And those are three really big question marks. And this, when we talk to people on consults about mold, we usually say 6 to 12 months. And the reason why it can vary so much is because if we have to do secondary mold work, if we have to do more parasite work, and if we have to do more yeast and fungal work, that adds extra time. And we literally have no idea until we get there. And for some people, we don't have to do any additional work. For some people, it's just a little parasite work or a little yeast and fungal work. But it really, really depends on the person because everyone is different. And I've seen people where I'm like, oh, we're definitely going to have to do like several months of additional work, be totally fine. And it's been the exact opposite here as well. So this is where things get really complicated. And this is also why doing something with a practitioner who is not fully well versed in mold and everything that comes along with mold can be really detrimental, because if you don't do this check here, you can really miss some things. And you can end up with like, especially continued yeast work. Gosh, like people with mold end up with chronic candida forever because it's not addressed well at this stage. And it just keeps growing and feeding in the body. And then it is releasing more toxins and then you get sick again. And it's a whole cycle here. And this is a huge, huge problem. So before we get into what that can look like, plus the viral stuff is like randomly pops up a lot
all the time.
People, yes, for people too. Real question mark. What is the immune system doing at this point too?
Yeah.
So before we dive into that, I want to dive into, if you don't do cell core, I do want to give you some other options of some protocols here. So go to our liver detox pathway support protocol, and that will phase 1, step 1. Step 2 can get a little funky. There's no really great comparison in how we do it with kind of stage 2. You can add in TEDCA, but TEDCA is in the original liver detox pathway support work. Depending on what binder you started with, you can upgrade. If you started with charcoal, you can upgrade to a clay or a gentle blend. I would not dive into GI detox, which I will talk about here in just a moment. It's aggressive and you're likely to still have a reaction at this point, but maybe you add in a clay. You could add in, maybe a multitude of some detox pathway support. You could add in maybe some phosphatidylcholine. I'll talk about that here when I get deeper into the bile support piece here. You could add in some antimicrobials at this point, kind of a general blend. There's a ton of options there for you. And then when we actually get to the mold piece, we will often, so it is a lot of supplements, full disclosure, this is the best comparison I've been able to find. And trust me, I tried to limit it. I really tried to limit it. So I would say first and foremost for fulvic acid, there's a product called, and I'm probably going to mess up the first word here. I'm going to do my best. Shilajit. Yeah, Shilajit, Shilajit fulvic acid complex. So this would be a good alternative to carboxy. This is going to be a fulvic acid, good as a pretty comprehensive mold binder here. So this is a really good product for this fulvic and humic acid, and it's a really good complementary alternative to the carboxy. So we've got that. And then kind of the next product I'd probably recommend is a product called Yeastanol. And so this is going to help with yeast and fungus issues. So this is going to really target that at that point. You could add in some additional gut work. I don't like to do it at this point. I know some people will add in Saccharomyces boulardii. Not my favorite to add in here quite yet. Then I like to do it, and it kind of depends on the person and how intense we want to go. GI detox is another really good one to add in here. This is going to be a really good blend of there's clay, there's charcoal, there's zeolite, there's a couple other things in GI detox. GI detox is very intense, full disclosure. So that can be a good time to add this in. Or I would add in ultra binder sensitive formula. That is a really good alternative at this point here as well. Usually if we're not using Cellcore, we're going to need at least 2 different types of binders because really honestly, nothing compares to carboxy and the strength of carboxy at this point. So, or nothing I've found on the market. If there is, wonderful. I just haven't found it. So you could do that. And then a liposomal glutathione is a good option here as well. Just adding in some additional liver support. You could also stay on TEDCA as well, or alternatively due to phosphatidylcholine. Once again, we're going to get here in just a moment. And then FC-Cytal is another really good one to add in here. This is going to add in some other antimicrobial work. Just to make sure, once again, we're getting really that gut piece and clearing out that gut piece in here as well. Just because of the amount of products in the alternative parasite work, if you're doing this alternative mold protocol, it's a lot of products to do the mold and parasite work. So what I kind of recommend to do is either do 2 of the binders for mold at this point, and then do a couple of the parasite products. But I would you almost kind of have to split it up just because your body's not going to be able to handle quite everything. I would do mold, and then if you can overlap a little bit, the mold and parasite work, that would be ideal. But the parasite work, and if you go back to our parasite episode, we lay it out in there. So, but it is just a lot of products, which once again, this is why we like to use Cellcore, because we just don't have to use so many products. They combine a lot of their products to make it so much easier and simpler. We just don't have to use that much.
Yeah, it's totally different. And it is doable this way. Like if you're someone who maybe can't afford to work with us and really desires to like get started and do this on your own, like it's possible. There is other ways to do it. We, again, just prefer the Cellcore, stronger, seems to be easier route. In some of these supplements too that Megan just listed will kind of spin off and use a handful of these products for the secondary phase of mold if you're someone who needs that. Like the liver support, we'll usually choose between the glutathione supplement and the TUDCA based on where your liver enzymes are at. Like if they're still pretty high and they need a lot of work, we're usually going to go for the TUDCA on an empty stomach because that's stronger. But again, like if you're listening, don't go take TUDCA on empty. Like that is something that you have to work up to get there. And then we do utilize the Saccharomyces boulardii during the secondary part of mold most often for people.
And usually that is only if the gut appears to be in a really, really good place, meaning we don't need to do any additional yeast, fungus, bacteria, and or parasite work. At that point is when we're doing, if we determine from blood work and or other testing that we need to do a secondary mold protocol, always liver. And then if the gut is clear, then we will introduce Saccharomyces boulardii for a couple reasons here. So one, only if the gut is clear because it is a probiotic. I know some people use it for gut killing. I have literally never seen it work. Not saying it doesn't. In my professional experience and personal experience, I was on it so many times. I've never seen it work well in that capacity. However, we also don't like to leave the gut in a vulnerable place for too long. So if we've done all of this killing in the gut, and then we still need to do some secondary mold work, we do want to introduce some good bacteria into the gut to make sure it's not left too vulnerable for more overgrowth to come back. And Saccharomyces boulardii is also a mold binder. So it kind of acts as a dual purpose of it helps us start to rebuild the gut a little bit before we go into a full rebuild of the gut. And it's also valuable as a mold binder as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, there's multiple reasons why we will choose to use that one if we're doing some secondary mold work. And then we also typically go for, I mean, after you've taken carboxy, that, like we said, that's the strongest mold binder that we know of. So after that, we do move people into GI detox, which again, it's a strong binder, not the same as mold. That is one that needs to be taken on an empty stomach, away, away from food, all other medications, supplements, everything like that. But it is a really powerful binder, and it's a mix of different basic binders like charcoal. I think you already said this, zeolite and clay and whatnot. So still a really great blend to go in and do some wrap up work with. And then I don't think you talked about the phosphatidylcholine yet, did you?
Yeah. So this is where
the bile part.
Bring up the bile. Yeah. So I want to talk about bile here a little bit, and I also want to talk about like draining of the brain. I'm going to bring TEDCA back in here as well. Yeah. So one of the ways our body naturally gets things out, naturally detoxes, especially toxins out of the body, is through our bile. And bile is produced in the liver, it is stored in the gallbladder, and then it is released for fat digestion. And it also is recirculated through our body. Bile doesn't leave, it shouldn't really leave our body. It should be, it can, which is an issue, but it really should be recirculated. And one of the issues when we get into specifically mold, I've only seen this most commonly with mold. I haven't seen a lot of research in this happening with heavy metals, but specifically with mold, there is good research with phosphatidylcholine and the mold. But the phosphatidylcholine helps to thin out the bile, which acts as it's not a binder per se, but it acts as an assist to help the mold get out of the body by thinning the bile. So it is a really valuable tool for many, many people. Now, one of the reasons why we don't use it earlier is because we often use TEDCA, and TEDCA does many, many things, which is why we love it so much. It supports healthy bile flow. It is very supportive of the liver. And one of the really cool things that it does is it helps to drain the brain. And what happens when we sleep, like our brain naturally, like for lack of a better term, flushes itself out to help clean and repair itself. Our whole body does this, our brain does this. And many people with mold don't sleep very well, which is an issue, meaning our brain doesn't get that opportunity. There's also neurotoxins. I talked about this with the organic acids test. The quinolinic acid, which is a neurotoxin, can get into our brain. We can also have neural inflammation when it comes to mold. I've seen a lot of people with even buildup of fluid behind their eyes and with pressure behind their eyes and fluid. And a lot of physicians will recommend a draining, like a spinal tap to be able to drain the fluid out, which, I mean, I've never had that done, but I can only assume it is super, super painful. Necessary in times, absolutely. However, if we can avoid that, I think most people would choose to avoid that. And so I've seen people come in with mold as a root cause with a variety of issues impacting the brain swelling, neural inflammation, ocular inflammation, just fluid inflammation that's impacting brain and or eyes. And the TEDCA helps to drain the brain. And very fortunately, now I'm not saying this is 100% of the cases, but I've worked with a handful of people where this has been the case, where they've been able to avoid intense procedures just by using TEDCA. And because it is draining of the brain, for a lot of people too, and I'll say that, I mean, this is for me, I feel a lot of clarity when I take TEDCA. And if I'm getting really stressed, if maybe I'm erring on the side of constipation or traveling, TEDCA is almost always with me because I know if I'm having a lot of sleep issues, TEDCA is one of the first things that I'll take because I know it's going to help drain my brain. I know it's going to be very supportive of the liver, and it's going to give me a lot of clarity. And that's huge in life, especially, work and working on complex cases. I want to make sure I have a really, really clear brain, can think, can communicate as best as I can. So really, really valuable. And that's a really important piece. And the number of people with neural inflammation, with so many cognitive issues, sleep issues coming in with mold as their big root cause is so significant. This is why we like the TEDCA first and foremost. And if someone continues to have mold issues after this initial protocol, a lot of value in adding in this phosphatidylcholine.
Yeah, both at some point both may absolutely be necessary, but yeah, TUDCA is one heck of a supplement that is really, really great for multiple things. Again, it is one that we recommend starting very slow with, because if you haven't done drainage work before, you're probably just going to have like a flush of toxins that are going to try and come out when you take it. So super important to go really slow on that. But yeah, that's a product that we use very often, to say the least.
Exactly.
So that kind of wraps up what the secondary mold portion looks like, and also gives people an idea of if you want to dive in and start to do some work on your own. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple other things. If we have to do additional yeast work, it kind of depends on when we're going to do that. If we see mold, we're going to do mold first, then get into yeast and fungal issues. And we'll often try and combine some of the yeast work with a little bit of the gut rebuilding protocol. So that will look like, Restore Flora is one of the probiotics that we really like. Mega Mycobalance is a really good product for continued yeast work. Oftentimes we'll still include a binder of some sort, and that largely depends on the person, what kind, which one, what kind of binder are we using at that point. Because one of the things you need to understand is when you have a yeast and fungal overgrowth issue, candida overgrowth, that is releasing toxins into your body continuously, which is a major problem. And we're also going to continue to add in liver support at that time too, because once again, your body's continuously being flooded with toxins by this overgrowth issue. And the goal here is to get this yeast and fungus to a manageable level. Once again, we all have yeast and fungus in our body. We have bacteria, we have parasites. The goal is to get these things back into a place that is manageable for your body, tolerable for your body, that your body can maintain. So that's what that looks like. Parasite work, oftentimes we'll do a full moon protocol or two, kind of depending on the person. Sometimes we'll do additional actual parasite work. With CellCore, we might do para 4. But that really depends on the person. And then we go into a full gut rebuild. Probiotics, prebiotics, heal and seal the gut lining, making sure that the stomach acid is in a really good spot. This is so important for maintaining healthy gut. We also look at nutrient deficiencies. Then we also look at the immune system and any viral issues that are still coming up. Or newly coming up, which it definitely happens. We've seen this quite a few times here. And then your body should be in a pretty good spot. And you really shouldn't have any major issues as long as you're doing maintenance work. Go back and listen to the parasite episode where we talk about maintenance with that. We recommend like liver supporting stuff just as maintenance, but that you should be in a pretty good spot at that point.
Yeah, after all that work, and I know it sounds like a lot too, and quite honestly, it is a lot because it takes a lot to heal from mold. So I'm not gonna to lie about that. It is a long process for sure. I did want to add in though, one of the things that if you're looking for physical symptoms of yeast, maybe after you've done some mold work to see if that might be showing up for you. If you see lots of like stringies in your stool, that's an indication that yeast might still be an issue. Maybe if you're having some GI issues still, some stomach discomfort, that's another thing to look out for. And even a yellow coating or like a thick yellow coating on your tongue, that's another thing to look out for. So just kind of to give you something to go off of if you're not looking at blood work per se.
Yeah, yellow or white tongue.
Yep.
The coating on the tongue. Also, if you have recurrent and still have recurrent UTIs, yeast infections, BV, it's a really common sign that you still have some yeast issues going on that still need to be addressed.
Yeah, those are big ones. So if you're doing mold work, keep an eye out for those, and that will give you a good idea on if you need to do a little bit of additional yeast work.
Yeah. So the next thing we want to get into, and this is once again, like if you're looking for practitioners to work with, ask about this. Do they use mast cell stabilizers? And what kind of mast cell stabilizers do they use? Because if you are working with a practitioner who is not using mast cell stabilizers or is not familiar with the wide variety, not just quercetin, not just vitamin C, the wide variety of mast cell stabilizers, and doesn't really use those consistently in their practice, this is a massive red flag.
Yeah, and not everyone, I will say not every single mold client that we work with, and even some non-mold clients for that matter, do need a little bit of mast cell support. And just to give like a brief overing, we have mast cells, and then we also have a histamine response. These two essentially present themselves in the same manner as far as like rashes, hives, maybe some lung issues showing up, like mucus issues. So they can present them sneezing. What else am I missing here?
Sinus pressure, sinus headaches, sensitivity to heat, sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sound, EMFs. If you get really red and blotchy going out in the sun, even for just a few minutes, or in the heat, if you have exercise intolerance where you get really flush, just doing really minor working out, super common sign. Now, if you're working out outside, running, super exerting yourself, of course, you're going to get red. I'm talking if you're doing very mild exercise and you're getting super flush, that's a really big thing. Mm-hmm. Also to note with this, so if you notice, especially a lot of these symptoms, if you eat food and you get stuffy or you start to sneeze, another really common sign. And if you are a menstruating female, if your symptoms get worse leading up to your cycle, this is a huge red flag. So estrogen and histamine attach to the same receptor in the cell. And so oftentimes we will see that as estrogen starts to rise right before our cycle, these symptoms start to get way worse. We will also see issues with estrogen, with hormones, sex hormones in general. You might have like symptoms of higher estrogen, breast tenderness, really get moody right before your period, constipation and or loose stool. Like some of these things are super common.
Yeah. And again, you really want to make sure or question the person that you're working with to make sure that they know about this. This is one of those things that was missed for me for so many years. And exactly what you said, Megan, like right before my cycle, sinus stuff got so much worse. It was like I was being exposed to tons of allergies, and like no one ever commented on it. No one brought it up that like, this is going to make everything harder for you essentially if it's not addressed. So this is a really, really important thing to ask about. But so mast cell and histamine issues can present themselves in the same way, especially with like hives or rashes and whatnot as well. And there's two things that we normally use. One is called
real quick, I just thought of something else. So also, not all mast cell issues are histamine related, just to be super clear. So you can have mast cell issues, like joint pain, joint inflammation. And I'm not absolutely not saying all joint pain and all joint inflammation is mast cell related. However, that can be a common symptom along with other symptoms of mast cell issues. a really good resource is mastcell360.com. They have trainings in there, they have webinars, they have all kinds of really, really great information all about mast cell issues. Mast cell issues, mast cell activation syndrome, it's extremely challenging to get diagnosed. I've only heard of maybe 2 or 3 physicians who were even aware of it. They were either immunologists or allergists, allergy doctors. So just for reference there, if your physician doesn't know what mast cells are, mast cell issues, mast cell activation syndrome, don't be terribly surprised because it's not very common that they're aware of this. And it's to get diagnosed, it's really hard. You have to be in an active flare when you're getting the blood test. You have to actually trigger your symptoms, be off all of any allergy meds, any histamines, some other types of medications. I am not an expert in testing for mast cell, and we obviously don't diagnose mast cell activation syndrome, but just from a client experience, I know exactly, I know the steps here. And yeah, you have to feel really, really bad going into the testing. So full disclosure just about that.
Yeah, if you're going to get tested for it,
yeah,
fair warned.
Yeah,
but
it's rough.
I will say, like, when we're working with mold clients, this isn't like, oh, we're putting everyone on a mast cell stabilizer. That's not the case. It's easy to tell for most people. They're coming to us with mast cell symptoms, like right off the bat, or they're not having any, and we're going to start opening up drainage pathways, and it'll start really early with like maybe some extra sinus stuff, extra like rashes, hives. Rashes under the armpits are something that I've been seeing a lot lately, like just very random things. And then that's when we're going to dive in and typically go for a mast cell stabilizer. There are a couple people who I would say more so not mold, maybe lean more towards like histamine issues, and we'll do something a little bit different for that. But for the mast cell stabilizers is what they're called, we usually lean towards one or the other. One is called biophysitin. And this is mainly good for when we're having skin issues that come up, like the rashes or hives, anything along those lines. And then
also really good for headaches.
Yes, for headaches. Yeah, it is super great for headaches. Perilla extract is the second one that we normally go for. And isn't it pine bark?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken? Yeah, it's pine bark. So that one we're gonna go for when we're dealing more with like mucus stuff and like the sinus issues. Maybe you have like a wet phlegmy cough going on or something like that. That one is much more tolerable for that kind of stuff. Also a little bit higher in the price point.
Yeah. Yeah. We do really like biophysitin because it is very inexpensive. Life Extension has a really good quality, very inexpensive product that it's nice when we can recommend that. And for reference, there's like 16 different mast cell stabilizers. Those are 2 of the more common ones. One of the biggest reasons why we don't like quercetin is a lot of people actually don't respond very well to quercetin as a mast cell stabilizer. Not saying it's not a good product. It's just for many people not a great mast cell stabilizer. Same thing, vitamin C, it's just not great. It's just not great as a mast cell stabilizer. It is not, vitamin C is good for many things. Not my favorite for mast cell issues. If someone is only having issues when they eat, we may recommend something that's more along the lines of a DAO support supplement that's going to help break down histamine specifically before a meal, especially if it's just from eating. It can be looped into the category of mast cell stabilizer. However, it is a little bit different here. So, something that there's also products that block histamine. There's things that like DAO supplements that break down histamine. These mast cell stabilizers are a little bit different, although you can loop all of these in under the category of mast cell stabilizer. So once again, not saying that everyone needs these because not everyone ends up needing them. And if you are working with someone and they are not familiar with mast cell stabilizers and don't use them as needed in their practice or only use one of those for everyone across the board, you may want to think about interviewing a few other people. We do use other ones in the practice. Those are just two of our most common ones that we will often use where we see a lot of success here. Evening primrose oil is another one. I'll use that with clients usually later down the road, especially if they've got some hormonal imbalances going on that's causing a lot of symptoms. That could be another support, but there's quite a few out there. So just for reference on that. But it is really important because when you're having mast cell issues, this is really stressful on the body. And you're also having some very uncomfortable symptoms. One of the other really uncomfortable symptoms that a lot of people experience is this sense of itchiness, but it's not, there's may not be a rash anywhere. And it's almost like the inside of your body is itchy and it's extremely uncomfortable. And you can take an antihistamine, like a Zyrtec, a Claritin at higher doses, and it'll help. You could take a Benadryl. I know many people have had to take Benadryl, and those aren't our favorite. Yes, if you need them, they're fine. However, we also have other alternatives to help your body stabilize these mast cell issues. So we use them as needed, and we do use them quite often because many people who have mold need them.
Yep. Yeah, that internal itchy feeling, it's almost really hard to describe for someone who hasn't experienced it to like know what it feels like, but it's extremely uncomfortable. And I honestly completely forgot about that one when we were listing off what it can feel like. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, if you've ever experienced it, you would choose to not remember what that feels like because it is crazy uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so that's just another really important piece here when we're dealing with mold and talking about mold. Yeah, anything else to add to that?
Nope. Then we just have our last little piece here.
Yeah. So another thing that comes with mold, so many great things, is the nervous system regulation piece, or how mold can affect our mental health. Huge, huge impact on your mental health. Not only is mold depleting so many things in your body, and there's also the co-infections that are also depleting things, but anxiety, depression, just overall like poor mental health is highly linked with mold toxicity in the body. Specifically when we're talking about the brain and things that are being depleted, B vitamins, super important here. And these are one of the things that we can see on the OAT test, which is another reason why that can be super helpful, is what areas are depleted and how is it affecting your brain?
Exactly. And so on the organic acids test, we get a look at all kinds of B vitamins, among other nutrients, and we get to look at a few different dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, neuroepinephrine pathways, which all have a huge impact on your mental and emotional health, let alone that neurotoxin, quinolinic acid. So all of these things are so important. And so, when we have, and so many people who have mold issues have pretty significant mental and emotional health struggles. And once again, if you have significant mental and emotional health struggles, not saying you have mold, however, they do go hand in hand oftentimes. And, one of the things that like we talked about way back in part 1 here was one of the ways that you can be more susceptible to mold toxicity is a history of trauma. And if your body is more sensitive under a state of chronic stress, and this is the case for many people. And so when we look at mold, we look at all of these physical things that we have just talked about over the course of 3 parts now. And once again, if you are working with a practitioner and they are not talking about nervous system regulation, helping your body feel safe again, ask some more questions, interview some other people, because this is a huge part in your long-term health, not only in the healing journey. And I would argue that I don't know if you can fully heal if you're not doing this work. That's a real question mark. I can say with full confidence that the likelihood of you staying healed long term, if you are not doing any of this work, is very unlikely. And this is
second that.
yeah. So, I mean, this is such a huge part. And, you know, if we go back to like other episodes that we've talked deeper about this is just so crucial, so fundamental. And this is going to also look so different depending on the person, but you have to be supporting the nervous system and learning to feel safe again, getting some of the trauma, getting some of the emotions. And also, you know, if you have mold issues, I bet you've probably been to quite a few doctors and been dismissed by almost all of them, if not all of them. Maybe you've heard that it's all in your head, you're crazy, you just have anxiety. I'm not saying you don't have anxiety, but you just have anxiety, you just have depression, you just have you know, other issues, you just have fibromyalgia, you just have chronic fatigue syndrome, you just have POTS. So it's really important that we look at childhood trauma, we look at adulthood trauma, we look at getting these emotions of feeling dismissed, of medical trauma out of the body, and retrain the brain here to teach it that you are safe. You can heal, you can be healed, you can stay healed, you can travel, you can see other people can come into your spaces. You can go to a place temporarily that has a little bit of mold and you'll be okay. You need to understand this, and your body needs to understand this. And this is why we've reinforced this so much. And this is such a big pillar in our practice with everything, but really in particular with mold.
Yeah. And I mean, just to get the point across even more here, like when you're coming to the end of your program or from healing from mold, when people ask us, well, what do I do to not be in this position again? There are two main things that we tell people, and it's going to be managing your stress, your mental health, all of that stuff. Literally the biggest thing that you can do to help keep your body in a safe space in liver support. Like that is how big this piece is here. And I have had clients before who aren't ready to dive in to the the mental health part of it. And I will say most often, as we get deeper into the work, things come up, things that you were not expecting. They're going to come up, they're going to present themselves, and it is totally up to you whether or not you choose to run with it and address it. I will say the people who choose to do that usually have a better outcome than the ones who don't. But yeah, this is just an incredibly important piece. And we also start really slow with this too. Like, I mean, and you can do this on your own, like start adding in some sort of daily mindfulness practice. And it is just going to kind of, once you start that and like looking inward, it's like you're blowing a piece of bubble gum. Like it's just going to keep going, opening up, and you're going to explore all these new things that pop up to work on. And really that is one huge thing that needs to be done with this work.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, fundamental, crucial, non-negotiable with us. And just to kind of wrap this up. So once we've done the mold, and I think we did an overview of this way back in another episode, maybe the last episode, I can't quite remember. But so after we've done mold, after we've done all of this gut work, we've rebuilt, we've looked at the immune system. If there are still lingering issues with hormones, with the thyroid, you know, with some of these other things that are impacted by so many things, this is when we're going to take a deeper look at that. And many people, everything else just kind of balances out. And for sometimes there's a little bit extra hormone support work or a little extra thyroid support work that does need to be done. So I don't want to discount that, discredit it, because it does happen. And by and large, the vast majority of issues are taken care of throughout this whole process.
Yeah. Yeah. In some of these things, like, I mean, a lot of people are coming to us, females, and they're saying, I have hormonal issues right now, or I'm just getting off of birth control. And oftentimes we'll say, like, we may not need to do specific things. It might just balance out on its own. And that is usually the case, not for everyone, but a large part of our clientele that does happen. It's crazy, the underlying things that come with hormones. But But yeah, so that's kind of where we wrap up. That's our process. I think we hit it all for 3 episodes. I feel like we covered it pretty well. Is there any other lingering pieces that you feel like we need to share?
I don't think so. I think that covers it. Thank you for hanging in with us for all 3 episodes, but we just see so many people who struggle so significantly with mold issues that we did really want to take the time to do a really deep dive into mold. If you have additional questions, we can absolutely do a follow-up episode and address just like other lingering questions. If you have them, you can put them in the comments. You can email us info@trifectacollective.net. DM us on any social media platform. We'll respond. We'll take a look. The team and myself. So yeah, thank you for hanging in here with us. And as always, we are a newer podcast. Like, subscribe, follow. Any 5-star reviews, if it resonates, really, really goes a super long way for us, and we really, really appreciate it. And we're so happy to share all of this information with you. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.